So to finish up the videos I've been making on RPGs, I wanted to address the topic of social issues in RPGs because somebody had left a comment on one of those videos expressing his surprise that SJWs were not more heavily invested in games such as Witcher 3. Now, I don't have any issues with games dealing with social issues, but the way one goes about it and the degree of believability that's injected into that, these are things that are very important if one is to do that. And you have a game such as Witcher 3, which does indeed talk about and address tons of so-called social issues. And it does it in a way that does not in the slightest resemble the SJW approach. Now, I don't think there's an axiomatic way of dealing with social issues. I don't think one way is quote-unquote right and the other way is wrong. I'm not going to claim that. But clearly the SJW approach is not the approach that many people enjoy, at least in camps outside of the SJW camp. So you get a game like Dragon Age Inquisition where you hear about the suffering and what have you of people, but you don't really see it on display. That's the very first thing that comes to mind when we talk about social issues. Whereas in Witcher 3, you have a game where it is claimed and it's told to us that this is a war-torn land, a land that has just been saturated in conflict. And you see it everywhere. You see corpses, you see battlefields. One of the first things you encounter in Velen is this immense battlefield just filled with corpses. And you have to help somebody find his brother, is presumed dead. I mean, this is just something that you don't see in any of the Bioware games. So you have an environment that's presented to you that visually conveys something that's very obvious. This is a war-torn land. This is a terrible situation to be in if you're living here. And that's just the visual, the environmental. And in addition to that, you see real persecution. You see the persecution of mages and, to a somewhat lesser degree, non-humans, led by the madman, King Radovich. And this is all very visible. It's talked about as well, but you can see it. And the other thing I think that distinguishes the Witcher 3, or say the CD Projekt Red approach to dealing with social issues, say compared to Bioware, which would like to lay claim to that particular genre, video games that deal with social issues, is that in Witcher 3, there is a degree of fatalism, I would argue, that infuses how the game approaches the topic of social issues, which is to say, yes, there are many social issues that people need to deal with, but there's no real sign that it's going to improve, or that these issues, or problems rather, could even be solved. It's a war-torn land with lots of problems, and people are forced, for better or worse, to deal with them. And I think, ultimately, that approach probably is much more reflective and reminiscent of the reality we live in, despite the pall of modernity that has been cast upon us and tends to cover up such truths. Many things are not within our grasp to solve them. And so Witcher 3 portrays that and delineates that very well, whereas there's no, Bioware games, by way of contrast, their solution is inclusion. Just have a cast of characters that fit some SJW stereotype. Quadrisexual, short-haired women that like every creature in existence for a romance. People of certain skin color, gender, sexual orientation. This is a terrible way of going about addressing social issues. There's something I mentioned before on my channel. One scene that's pretty minor. This is White Orchard, before you get to Velen, where you're trying to track down this griffin. And you encounter a hunter who it doesn't happen immediately. You have to talk to him, chat with him. You get this scene where he says, well, I'm cursed. I was cast out of the service to my lord, yada, yada, yada. And Witcher Geralt's thinking, well, oh, okay, do you suffer from lycanthropy? Maybe I can help you, maybe. And he goes on this tale about basically he was butt-fucking the Baron or the Lord's son, so he's basically gay. And Geralt's taken back a bit. He's like, oh, okay. He's a bit nonplussed, but it's like, oh, okay, that's cursed. I mean, this is obviously biased towards homosexuality, or against it rather, but it's done in a way that sort of makes sense in a context that made sense too. You start it doesn't happen immediately. You start a conversation with the hunter. He tells you about it, and I mean, that's the way you might want to deal with an issue like that if you want to even bring up the issue. And that's just one example. The persecution of non-humans, that's another one. It's on display. And the thing that I like about it is the realism, the fatalism, if you will. The fact that you're probably not going to solve these issues. I mean, even after you complete the game, there's no real happy ending. Yeah, it's maybe you settle down with your chosen wench, perhaps, and it's implied that it's a happy ending. But along the way, you lose a lot of people, potentially. You certainly lose Vesemir, regardless. And even in a place like Toussaint or Beauclair, yeah, it's all sunny, vineyards. It looks very, very pretty. I think the landscape in many ways is an improvement over the main game. But obviously beneath the surface, there are many issues. People still have problems. Bioware games, by way of contrast, are just strange. There are no real social issues addressed. Not always the case. I mean, the genophage issue, which was finally resolved, I guess, in Mass Effect 3, if you want to say that, and that would be perceived as sort of social issue, transposed from the human to the alien. But Bioware just their way of going about that is the SJW, which is just inclusion. The reason why SJWs don't enjoy a game like Witcher 3 is because Witcher 3 doesn't artificially try to be inclusive. Instead, it presents a world that is gritty and real given the context. There's real suffering. No one's having a good time. Men are not having a good time being maimed as soldiers. Women aren't having a good time being raped or what have you. No one's having a good time. The non-humans aren't having a good time. The mages need to flee for reasons of persecution. It's a grim and gritty world. And yeah, there are many social issues being interesting. And of course, as Witcher Geralt, you can oppose some of these ideas. Witcher Geralt doesn't support the persecution of mages or non-humans. In fact, you can stand up for them sometimes. But in doing so, neither Geralt nor the player who is playing Geralt is under the delusion that one time he's stepping in to support a non-human. And some of them are even ungrateful for it. I remember one scene in Novigrad where an elf woman is very ungrateful for you stepping in and helping her out. There's no illusion or delusion that that's going to change anything in the long run. And I think people appreciate that degree of realism and fatalism. I mean, the closest you can come to a happy ending that I can think of is in the Hearts of Stone DLC if you choose to save Olgrim, but it's not exactly that clear. Meanwhile, Bioware, all it does is just throw in random characters that they think will fit some set of criteria that they've dreamt up in their heads about diversity or inclusion. And once again, I'm not axiomatically saying that Witcher 3 does it right, Bioware does it wrong, but for someone of my inclinations and tastes, and for many others who prefer Witcher 3 to Bioware games, or just the CD Projekt Red approach in general, I prefer that fatalism and realism. It's kind of, it just resonates, I think, with a lot of us who pay attention to reality, knowing that many problems are unsolvable. Many things cannot be solved. But perhaps, even almost paradoxically, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. So when Geralt steps in and helps somebody out, a non-human or the mages, Long term, probably not a solution, but he's doing it because it feels right or he thinks it's right in the moment. And I think that's an important thing. It's like when you help a blind person across the street because, they're disadvantaged. You don't do it, or I certainly don't do it because you expect a reward or anything like that. It's just, and you're not going to cure blindness that way or even change that person's life immensely. You just do, it's a small context in which to do something good. And there are many such moments in The Witcher 3. Now, I have no doubt that the forthcoming title, Cyberpunk 2077, being worked on and produced by CD Projekt Red, even as I speak probably, is going to be obviously not the same fantasy context. It is cyberpunk, right? It is future, probably dark future, dystopian, something like that. I'm somewhat familiar with the pen and paper game. But if CD Projekt Red decides to tackle social issues, which I think is a virtual inevitability given the context of the game, think about it. You have a game where cybernetic enhancement is widespread. There's probably biases involved. I mean, who knows the details, but that's all going to be there. They will do it in a way that is reminiscent, I think, of Witcher 3, and not the social justice way. I would be shocked and disappointed if they did. So, as I move towards the conclusion of this video, there are good reasons why social justice warriors are not interested in, say, Witcher 3 or CD Projekt Red games, because to them, addressing issues just means inserting a bunch of characters or heroes or companions with random attributes that basically fulfill a checklist that they've created. We got the quadrisexual alien. We got the short-haired, lesbian-looking, non-heterosexual woman. Okay. We got the minority with dreadlocks. Okay. That's just an asinine way, in my opinion, of going about things. And they don't really want, and here's another thing, and this is my own personal opinion. The reason why SJWs aren't into a game like The Witcher 3 is because there is a hefty degree of realism there. People suffer, as I said. It's very clear. The land is war-torn. People are not having a good time. They want to live in a fantasy world. The SJW view of reality is a fantasy at base, so why would they want something that is much more reminiscent and reflective of reality? They spend most of their time avoiding reality, deflecting reality. Of course, eventually it does hit them, but there are so many reasons why SJWs don't like that kind of nitty-gritty realism, despite the fact that it addresses social issues, in my humble opinion, in a much better way and much more competently than anything the SJW team can do, such as the Bioware team. I'm sure Mass Effect Andromeda will have fantastic combat. No, I'm not sure of that. I hope it has good combat, but that's not the way. I don't expect to see social issues being brought up. Instead, we have a crew that sort of fits the criteria everyone's demanding of which minority should be in, which female character should be in, etc. We have a protagonist that looks very plain Jane at best. That's what they want. That's not my preference. So, all for addressing social issues here, but not the way the SJWs demand it or want it to be the case. So, yeah. Anyway, I think I'll close up here with this sort of mini-series on RPGs. More to come, unrelated to RPGs, I think. But thanks for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your weekend, and take care. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.